Calvinism teaches divine determinism, which means that all things are causally determined by God, including all thoughts, desires, and actions of His creatures. Some Calvinists hold to what is called Compatibilism, which is a form of divine determinism, which is discussed in other videos. See the show notes for more details. There are typically four main proof texts referenced by Calvinists to demonstrate divine determinism. Genesis 50, where Joseph is sold into slavery, Isaiah 10, where the Assyrians are used by God as a rod of correction against Israel, Exodus 9, the hardening of Pharaoh, and Acts chapter 4, Christ's crucifixion. Check the show notes to find the videos on all of these proof texts used by Calvinists to prove divine determinism. For the purpose of this video, we will be covering Isaiah chapter 10, where God uses the king of Assyria to bring judgment against the nation of Israel.
Chapter 10. Woe to those who enact evil statutes, and to those who constantly record unjust decisions, so as to deprive the needy of justice, and rob the poor of my people of their rights, so that widows may be their spoil, and that they may plunder the orphans. Now what will you do in the day of punishment, and in the devastation which will come from afar? To whom will you flee for help, and where will you leave your wealth? Nothing remains but to crouch among the captives, or fall among the slain. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger, and the staff in whose hands is my indignation. I send it against a godless nation, and commission it against the people of my fury, to capture booty and to seize plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. Yet it does not so intend, nor does it plan so in its heart, but rather it is its purpose to destroy and to cut off many nations.
One Calvinist apologist, Dr. James White, comments on Isaiah 10 saying, quote, "In one passage we have God's holy intention of judging His people through the means of Assyria. Yet God holds Assyria accountable for her sinful attitudes in being so used. God judges them on the basis of their intentions. And since they come against Israel with a haughty attitude that does not recognize God's power and authority, they too are judged. This is compatibilism with clarity. God uses the sinful actions of the Assyrians for the good purpose of judging His people, and yet He judges the Assyrians for their sinful intentions. God's action in His sovereignty is perfectly compatible with the responsible and culpable actions of sinful men." End quote. Provisionists like myself would agree that God used the evil intentions of the Assyrians to bring judgment on Israel. However, we do not believe that God, quote, sovereignly brought about those evil intentions. Thus, our view does not bring God's holiness into question or create issues with the concept of divine culpability. But one of you may say, surely Calvinists do not really teach that God sovereignly brings about every evil intention, do they?
Has God predetermined every tiny detail in the universe, such as dust particles in the air? And then I should add here, including all our besetting sins.
Yes.
In contrast, Provisionism teaches that God allows or permits creation to act freely, as opposed to being causally determined by a divine, all-encompassing, meticulous decree. And, at times, God, being all-knowing, can and will use men's evil intentions to bring about His good purposes and plans. God's wrath is often depicted in Scripture as God's permitting the natural consequences of moral evil, which is not a problem in a worldview where the moral evil is brought to pass by someone other than God. God's wrath can literally be described as God separating Himself from us so that we experience the natural consequences of our own free moral actions. That is precisely what we see happening in Isaiah chapter 10. Instead of protecting Israel from Assyria, which He promised to do if they remained obedient, God removes His hand of protection and permits the Assyrians to follow their own libertarianly free will. God does not cause or bring about the evil intentions of the Assyrians. So he is perfectly just to judge them for their rebellious action, despite the fact that God used their rebellion to accomplish divine judgment on Israel for their own disobedience. The fact that God may have incited the already rebellious Assyrians to consider the already rebellious Israelites to be their next victims does not negate the Israelite and Assyrian people's individual responsibility in becoming rebellious to begin with. Would Calvinists have us believe that God, quote, sovereignly brought about the disobedience of the Israelites and the Assyrians so as to use the Assyrians' disobedient actions to judge the Israelites' disobedient actions? What would be the point in that? We do affirm that God may use the free rebellious actions of some to bring about the discipline or judgment of others. But we vehemently reject the notion that our thrice holy God brings about the rebellion of morally sinful creatures. According to James chapter 1, he does not even tempt men to do evil, much less sovereignly and unchangeably determine that they will. 1 John 2:16 teaches us, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world." Calvinism claims all things are brought about by God's sovereign, meticulous decree. But the Scripture says that pride and lust are not from the Father, but from the world. From the website of the late R.C. Sproul, a prominent Calvinistic apologist, Ligonier Ministries writes, "God has planned or decreed all things, and thus they surely take place as he has planned, decreed, or ordained them." End quote.
Because they have filled this place with the blood of innocents, and have built the high places of Baal to burn their sons in the fire as burnt offerings to Baal, which I did not command or decree, nor did it come into my mind.
So Calvinism says God decreed all things, but God says, through the prophet Jeremiah, "I did not command or decree that, nor did it enter into my mind," demonstrating that God knows and uses evil intentions of men does not prove divine determinism, or what some call compatibilism. It only demonstrates his omniscience and his sovereign ability to bring about his purposes through the free choices of creatures. Remember to like and share this video, and it really helps if you subscribe by clicking on the logo in the bottom right corner. And if you can support us, go to Soteriology101.com and click on the support link in the top right corner. If you want to learn about how to get a higher education, click on the classroom link and learn more about Trinity Seminary.